Okay, welcome everybody to the our monthly e-extension webinar. Um, my name is Jackie Jacob. I am the coordinator for the Poultry Small and Backyard Flocks Community of Practice on e-extension, which organizes these presentations. This month's presentation is on raising guinea fowl, and Dr. Samuel Nahashan from Tennessee State University will be your presenter. If at any time you have any questions, just type it in the chat box, and we'll see if we can get Sam to answer it. Because there's an echo with me, I'm going to mute my microphone and let Sam talk. Go ahead, Sam.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a really great pleasure to speak with you this afternoon. And I don't know how many were present last year when I presented this topic on raising guinea fowl. Um, but some of the information that I'll be presenting would be new. However, much of it is going to be about the same. And I will actually take some time on the latter part to dwell on the very, very important aspects of raising guinea fowl, or in general, really, raising small flocks. So my name is Sam Nahasham from Tennessee State University. And this is going to my 14th year here at Tennessee State University. And since my arrival here, I have actually researched on guinea fowl, uh, besides also working with the broiler chickens as well as laying chickens. But much of my time has been on the guinea fowl. So for today, I'll spend some time just running through some different varieties of guinea fowl. Usually we talk about varieties. We also talk about species. So I want to at least clarify what these actually mean to us. Now, Jackie, in progressing the slides, let me see. Okay, so we're good. So this is the layout of my presentation. I'll go through the introduction first, and then we'll talk a little bit of the purpose of raising guinea fowl. Then we'll look at management. I know many of you are interested in learning more about management. So we'll be looking at incubation, brooding, housing, feeding, and also managing these birds for disease prevention. Now, again, if you have a question while I'm presenting, feel free to stop me, and I'll try as much as possible to address any questions that you might have. So as I said before, in raising guinea fowl, or when we look at guinea fowl at large, regardless of where actually these birds are raised, because we already know where they originate from the continent of Africa. But I mean, now guinea fowl production is actually just widespread around the globe. And on commercial aspects, actually, guinea fowl is raised more in the European countries than it is in the United States. And you'll find a little bit of commercialization in Africa as well. So when we look at genetic distinctions between guinea fowl, that's when we talk about the species. And then within those species, actually, we've come down to develop different varieties of guinea fowl. Now, the most common of the guinea fowl varieties that we utilize, and the ones that we have utilized mostly here at Tennessee State, the French, which is the mid type, and also the Pearl Gray, which has a smaller body frame, and it is the egg type. So right on this slide, you'll see one of the species, which is the helmeted guinea fowl. It's very, very common around the globe. And then right next, we have the black guinea fowl. Uh, Very, very colorful, colorful birds. And then the white-breasted guinea fowl. Now, many of these, for instance, the white-breasted guinea fowl uh, pretty much is not, and again, for us here at Tennessee State University, we're trying to work on guinea fowl as a commercial bird, but we do have other uses of the guinea fowl. People raise them for different purposes, and I'm sure you're clear about this one. For instance, for those who raise them as watchdogs and so on. But mostly the pearl gray and the French are the current commercial varieties. And then that's a picture of the plumed guinea fowl. You can see the comb. The vulturine almost looks like a vulture, and you'll find this mostly in the semi-arid tropical climates. This is in Tsavo, Kenya. And then we also have the crested guinea fowl. Almost looks like the crested crane. Okay, now these are the varieties. We have the pearl gray, French, white African, royal purple, slate, coral blue, several opaline, pewter, bronze, buff, lavender. And much of the differences actually between these varieties of guinea fowl really it could be just plumage uh, besides anything else. So people have just crossbred them for different purposes, include just plumage. So you'll find tons and tons of these varieties of guinea fowl. Now, people raise guinea fowl for various purposes. Some people will raise them as pets, and again, plumage is a big thing. I know I have attended several of these guinea fowl shows, and I have seen people who just have fun just breeding them for different uh, color formations. They use as ornamentals, as hunting game, which in many places is also prohibited. But again, in many places, you'll find that guinea fowl is also used as a watchdog because of their sound and their ability to actually alert homestays when there is danger. They use as insect controls as well. They're very, very good in picking up ticks from the ground, from the grass, and from vegetation. And also for meat and eggs, which is basically what we do mostly. We try to improve the guinea fowl for those specific purposes, just for meat uh, and for eggs. So for many of us, I'm sure, for those of you on this webinar, you do have your own reasons for raising guinea fowl. And I want us to run through, for the next slides, I want us to look at some of the aspects uh, of actually raising guinea fowl and the things that we actually consider as very, very important, because just like in any other poultry, if you're raising guinea fowl either as a backyard flock or if you're raising guinea fowl for meat or egg production for commercial purposes, management plays a major role. So it doesn't matter whether it's just a small backyard flock or large scale flocks. I mean, the magnitude of losses that you would incur basically would be different based on the size of the flock. But again, management plays a very essential role in this. So for us, while we look at the commercial value of the guinea fowl, we look at specific things that we consider to be important for the consumer. And for those who prefer to eat eggs or those who prefer to eat poultry meat, guinea fowl actually does provide actually that commodity. Um, because if you look at this slide, this is a nutritional value of edible meats. And if you look at guinea fowl compared with other meats, you'll find that actually the guinea hen has 23.4% crude protein, 8.9% fat, and 717 calories per pound of meat. And if you compare that with actually other poultry species as well as beef, this is veal, and then pork, you find that guinea fowl actually does stand out when it comes to crude protein content, as well as we all don't like to eat fatty stuff because of the health consciousness of the consumers, including ourselves. So again, guinea fowl tend to be very, very lean when it comes to fat deposition, gives very, very few calories uh, as a meat product. So it becomes a very, very preferable commodity for consumption when you compare it with other meats. And not to belittle the fact that really you also have consumers who would want to just consume uh, a meat that actually tastes different from anything else. So we have many fancy restaurants around the globe that actually would be serving the guinea fowl um, as a delicacy. And as a matter of fact, if you go to many restaurants, you'll find that guinea meat is very, very expensive. So for those who want to raise guinea fowl as a commercial product, you really there's very good opportunity, and there are selling points actually for the value of and quality of the product that comes from raising the bird. So usually one of the things that we consider quite importantly, and we sort of stress to producers is, and again I mentioned this earlier, is management. And usually the management is going to be in terms of nutrition, which is very, very key. And for anyone who is actually raising poultry has to understand that the the large proportion of the cost of production actually comes from feeding. That is going to constitute about 65 to 75% of the total cost of production. So any savings that you can make from feed could actually translate to either profitability, or if you don't manage the feeding very well, you can also run a very a bad business, a losing business for that matter. So feeding is very, very essential. And then also that comes along with control of diseases. Because again, at the end of the day, you are looking at the conversion. If you're raising these birds for meat, you want the birds to be able to convert that feed that is very expensive into muscle. You want to make sure that these birds are very efficient in that conversion. And for them to do that as well, besides just formulating feeds that are economical, you want to make sure that these birds are actually healthy, because there is no way that the birds are going to be able to convert the feed into muscle if they're not healthy. So those stand out to be two elements within the management protocol of poultry that you have to observe very, very uh, keenly. Now, one thing I would mention is that, we talk about health. Uh, in birds or in raising poultry, we consider maternal immunity to also play a major role, especially when these birds are pretty young, about 2 to 4 weeks of age, before they actually develop their immune system. So the management that you provide to the breeder birds, and again, that is in terms of nutrition and anything else, vaccination and all those. If you don't do that, so in terms if you don't provide optimum feed, if you don't provide your vaccination to the breeder birds, then you should be sure that your birds will not have a good start. And that actually has been observed to translate into poor performance and poor conversions. So it's very, very hard to be profitable when you're operating that way. So you want to make sure that you always obtain, if for those of you who just hatching eggs, incubate those, and then hatch them to generate your flocks. You want to make sure that you learn very, very well who your breeders are. So you need to know how they feed their birds. You need to know what the genetic potential of their birds are, because that is what is going to translate into performance of your flock that you raise. So you have to learn the processes of management, as well as the background of these birds from the hatcheries very, very well. Um, so there are other general things that probably you can look at. For instance, uh, usually the size of the eggs. There is usually a correlation, a positive correlation of chick size and the size of the egg. So if you have a larger egg, you end up hatching a larger chick. And so in a sense that if you have that, and this is going towards sort of uh, telling you that if you incubate small eggs, then chances are that you will hatch small birds. And usually there is also that negative correlation of performance and the size of the egg. So in other words, if you have those small eggs, you hatch small chicks, and small chicks tend to perform poorly once they actually hatch. So you have to make sure that you do understand all those things. The quality of the eggs. If you're going to hatch those eggs, they have to be good size eggs. Usually, in many cases, we would recommend. I mean, for us, we use large eggs, not extra large, not small size eggs. So that gives us also tends to give quite some uniformity on the crop in terms of the offsprings that we raise. Now, this is an example of for those of you. This is to the benefit of those of you who are raising small flocks. Usually for us, we incubate and hatch probably 2,000 or more eggs. But for those raising small flocks, they are usually small incubators that you can actually place on the bench top. And I just gave an example of these few here on the slides. Uh, the one on the far right, the bench top, you could probably hatch about 20 chicks. You could incubate 20 eggs on that. And they vary in price. For instance, this one here could incubate probably 50 eggs or more. But then it costs more, probably around $600 to $700 for a new unit. These are the ones that are pretty cheap, probably $20 to the far right one. This is a styrofoam one. So again, you can do this if you're raising just backyard flocks. You can actually incubate using the small scale incubators on your own, just in your house. But again, remember, there are essential things there in management that you want to focus on as well. Because I mean, in this case, we are trying to mimic the natural process. of the bird. Usually the guinea fowl will incubate between 12 to 15 eggs. Uh, and so, the small incubator, I mean, sometimes you can use, if you want, you can actually use the surrogate hens to sit on these eggs. But again, it's more manageable if you can operate one of the small incubators in that sense artificially. So many people would prefer to do that other than using the surrogate hens for hatching purposes. But again, regardless of whether you are going to use a surrogate hen or you're going to use these artificial incubators, you still have to manage those very, very well in terms of humidity and temperature and air circulation, which are very essential in incubation. And while you do that, we recommend that you incubate your eggs large ends up, because that's where the air cell is. And during the embryonic development, you still need that exchange of gases. So you want that exposed, and it's also very essential when the chicks peep uh, during the 28 days for the guinea fowl. So these are the parameters that are recommended: oxygen and carbon dioxide for gaseous exchange. And then usually when you incubate the eggs, then you have to rotate them during the first 18 days, after which you don't want to do that. The initial rotations just ensures that at least you keep the embryo suspended in the egg so that they don't stick to the inner shell membrane. So these are the factors that actually, I mean, just to sum what I've been talking about, the factors that would actually influence hatchability. And one of those is fertility, genetics, nutrition, disease. We do have diseases such as pylori, salmonella, that can be transmitted actually vertically. So the hen can transmit that disease through the eggs. So in many cases for the commercial production, you do have testing, official testing of all breeding flocks to ensure that at least there's no transmission of that disease down the hen through the eggs. And then quality of the eggs, that's where your expertise comes in for selection purposes. What size of the eggs do you want to actually set? Are they clean or dirty? Those kind of things. So all those do influence hatchability. Uh, Fertility is influenced by other things. It could be just the number of males to female ratios that you would have in a setting. It could be nutritional. It could be the age of the flock. So there is a distinction between factors that would influence fertility and hatchability. I mentioned that you set the eggs large and up. That's just an illustration to sort of stress that point. Now, in incubation, you always want to use clean eggs. I usually tell a story where we recommend that all hatching eggs be clean. So in other words, if you're going to be setting eggs, you want to make sure that they don't stay for too long. The longer you store hatching eggs, for instance, if you're going to be collecting eggs over several clutches before you incubate them, you want to store them in a cool place. And the longer you store the eggs, should the temperature be lower. So the recommendation is 55 to 65 degrees Fahrenheit if you're going to be storing those eggs for 7 days. If you're going to be storing them longer, then that temperature needs to drop from 65 towards 55. So again, it's recommended that you don't store these hatch eggs beyond 14 days, because the longer you store them, the lesser the chances of those eggs actually hatching once you incubate them. Now, to avoid dirty eggs, you can actually pick these eggs more frequently. Depending on how many birds you have per pen or within your flock, and the frequency of lay. You can actually just go in and pick up those eggs before birds just trample on them and soil them. Now, in many cases, when uh, finances are limited, it's hard to pick and choose. So many people would sort of just clean the soil eggs a little bit. You can use sandpaper. Try to avoid washing as much as possible because you don't want to. I mean, in either way, washing or using sandpaper, you can still deplete the cuticle, which is very, very essential in preventing microbial penetrance to the internal contents of the egg, which could lead to actually bacterial contamination and also mortality if there was any embryo that was developing. So in some cases, you can actually clean if you don't have that messy shells and save those eggs for that matter. But again, usually there is also another preventative measure where before you incubate the eggs, you can actually fumigate them using formaldehyde gas uh, just to sort of sanitize and destroy any pathogenic microorganisms that might be overlaying the shell before incubation. Now, usually the story that I give is that, I mean, once when we were in college, in graduate school, we set an experiment where the professor was stressing that we need to be incubating clean eggs and dirty eggs never hatch. Uh, and really what happens was that actually all the eggs, soiled and the clean ones, they actually all hatched. Um, so sometimes you might think that those eggs will not hatch, but they could hatch. But I mean, the thing is, there are isolated cases where such would happen. And it is by chance, and you don't want to take that chance because uh, one time, if you let that go, then that could mean huge losses for you. So again, I mean, you could do this experimentally, but again, on general terms, what happens is that when you set up dirty eggs, usually you'll end up with those bacterial contamination, and then you can have explosions in your incubator and end up losing all the eggs. This is just a chart that is showing the incubation parameters in terms of temperature and humidity. We do have the guinea fowl right here. So the incubation period for the guinea fowl is 28 days as opposed to 21 days for the chicken. And then we do have the temperature requirements here. We usually start off uh, at higher temperatures, lower humidity, and then when we proceed beyond the 18 days of incubation, then we decrease the temperature and increase the humidity because by this time you need higher moisture for these birds. Um, this is again just incubation and hatchability chart. Just an illustration of the number of days that it takes for these eggs to hatch and the number of eggs that these birds will lay per year. The guinea fowl do not lay, again, they do not lay that many eggs per year, except just recently, actually, I purchased some eggs from H&M Hatchery from Pennsylvania, and those birds, I mean, I purchased actually some birds, day-old chicks of the pearl gray variety, and they produce more than 200 eggs per year, and that was amazing for guinea fowl. Usually, they are very, very seasonal. They will lay from March until sometimes in October when it starts to get cold. They will pause. They will stop laying. But this flock just kept on laying throughout the year. Um, when it comes to once you hatch the birds, then there is brooding. So commercially, we have commercial brooding systems where you have brood alarms and then you have hoovers, and then setting up perimeters just to consolidate your birds in one small area. And I think that should be in the next, should be in one of these slides. There you go. This is the hoover. This is the setup that you should have. And then you have the heat source. And then you make sure that all the feeders and waterers are just within the periphery, so that the birds can continue receiving the warmth at an early age. You want to restrict these birds as much as possible from wandering around from where there is no source of heat. And again, this is part of the management process um, for these birds. So in other words, if you give your birds a proper start in life, then their overall performance will be fine. And in a sense, you will be able to meet your goals if you keep your birds healthy and you give them that good start. And again, I'm just stressing on management. You could do everything else in the right way, but if you're sloppy with your management, then that could really be very, very, very treacherous or detrimental to your production. Now, usually in many cases, if you're even for the small producers, it's recommended that for the houses that you have, regardless of the size of the house, make sure that it's a concrete floor, because it's easier to clean. Because in poultry houses you have diseases, and wherever you raise poultry, you're going to have these diseases, and time again, you will require some cleaning process. And so it's very, very hard to clean a dirt floor and disinfect a dirt floor. It's more manageable when you have a rough concrete floor. So it's usually recommended that you have such. And then just overlay it with about 2 inches of litter material. In many cases, we use the wood shavings. Pine wood shavings do well for that. Don't use sawdust because birds will eat the sawdust, and that's not healthy for birds. Such. Okay, now in terms of brooding, when birds actually hatch, uh, we start them. We are taking them from an incubator that's around 98 to 99 degrees Fahrenheit. So we want to put them in a house environment that is not too far distant from that temperature of the hatcher. So you want to start them between the 90 to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and then lower that temperature weekly. And it's usually recommended that we do that by about 5 degrees Fahrenheit per week, until you bring them down to 70, 75 degrees Fahrenheit or room temperature. And by that time, really, these birds will have developed their own plumage, their own feather cover to withstand any cold spells. This is how birds look like during brooding. Now, on the top far left side is an illustration of birds that have chicks that are very, very comfortable. And right below that is an illustration where there's a draft coming from the southeast direction. And then right top is an illustration of a setup where birds are actually very, very cold, and you see them all coalescing together to sort of garner warmth from each other. And then when it's too warm, when the hoover, for instance, is generating too much heat, you'll see birds run to the periphery. And if you have a brooder guard where the birds cannot escape through, then they will just hang around the guard. So in any house, big or small, ventilation is very essential as well. Um, if it is commercial and if you can afford it, in many cases, people would also use the open-sided housing where you can just have smooth draft pass through if you're not able to afford the ventilation fans or those huge commercial setups. So ventilation is going to be very key because you have birds actually do excuse me, birds actually do produce a lot of ammonia. And so the ammonia, if you have birds in large numbers, you will have actually you will have ammonia actually concentrations increase within the houses, and usually performance actually does decline with the increased elevations of ammonia in the house. So the ventilation does help actually is that in addition to just air circulation. Okay, this is an illustration of another brooder setup. Now, the if you look to your far right, this is what I illustrated before of a good brooder setup where you have the waterers and the feeders just um, laid out in a fashion that is accessible to all birds and evenly throughout the brooder guard. Okay, I'm going to skip that. Now, one of the other things that we actually consider essential in guinea fowl production, and this is what many people have called me about. We've been having, for instance, once you get your day-old birds, or if you are having an incubator, once you hatch those birds, many people would be interested in actually differentiating the sexes of these birds. And it's not as easy as it is with chickens or turkeys for that matter, because we have had a lot of challenges because the reproductive organs of the guinea fowl, which basically with traditional poultry we use to differentiate the sexes, are not well defined, as well as the secondary sex characteristics. For instance, the combs and the plumage setup, they do not actually lay out just like it happens with traditional poultry chickens in that case. But again, there are ways that we are able to sex these birds. Uh, One of these comes later in life by just the sound that these birds actually make. For instance, the females will they'll make the quatrack sound or buckwheat, and you can tell that those are actually females. Now we have some technology that actually helps us, the DNA technology. We do have a way that we can actually distinguish these birds, the sexes within the labs. Now, what we have actually observed over time is that usually males and females have different growth characteristics. So the guinea fowl does demonstrate that just like any other poultry. And later in age, we can use some of those characteristics to distinguish the sexes. This is some data that we actually collected here in our lab. These are males of the pale gray guinea fowl. So if you look at the growth or the body weights of the males as opposed to the females, you'll definitely see that the males tend to gain weight faster than females at the same age, and sometimes we call that sexual dimorphism. Housing is very essential. Again, I have to keep stressing that. We have observed that if you're going to be raising guinea fowl in cages, then you need about 1394 square centimeters per bird. that is for the Pal Gray, and the French will require, you can raise those on the floor because they're the meat type. So we do raise 12 birds per square meter of the French. So the essential piece in terms of housing is adequate space, cleanliness, and basically provide comfort for the birds. In some cases, you can actually put some roots there where birds can jump in and be happy. But again, make sure that the house environment and the floors can be cleaned occasionally as a disease prevention uh, mechanism. Now, for small flocks, I know sometimes many people, and probably some of you, would want to raise these birds outside in the range. The only difficulty with raising birds out in the range is, and this comes as a part of biosecurity measures. When birds are out there, they are coming into contact with actually wild birds, and wild birds are actually sources of most of our poultry diseases. So you want to make sure that you do have actually a vaccination program for these birds if you're going to at least raise them outdoors. There are diseases that are easily passed from wild birds to our flocks that we actually raise. So you can prevent those, and the only best way to do that is through vaccination. Okay, let's look a little bit about on feeding. I did mention that much of the cost in raising guinea fowl is going to come in form of feeding, and that is, we basically would feed those birds to meet their maintenance and production needs. So it's going to be growth, egg production, or reproduction. So these are the main nutrients that we'll be looking for in our feeds. So you're looking for the sugars, the carbohydrates, the fats, proteins, vitamin, minerals, water. And then in some cases, we have plant extracts. And this is because there are some plant extracts that actually do provide additional nutritional value. We call these unidentified growth factors. And then, so in the case of vitamins, these ones we usually add in small quantities in the feed. They are essential for metabolism, so you always want to make sure that there's enough. Don't store your feed in warm places because the vitamins actually will dissipate. If your environment is not that suitable, make sure you always add a little bit extra, and we call this fortification, so that at least your birds can meet their minimum requirements. So it's the same thing with minerals. Minerals are cofactors, enzyme cofactors, so they're very, very useful in metabolism. Add in small quantities, but make sure that you supply them in enough quantities. If you do not provide adequate nutrition, then you will end up with diseases that are actually caused by nutritional deficiencies. If you have deficiency of calcium, you're going to have weak legs, you're going to have osteoporosis. If you don't have phosphorus, you're going to have the same issues, the same bone problems. And so you want to make sure that the feed is balanced. And usually what I recommend is that you get in touch with a nutritionist. When you purchase your food, make sure that at least it's tested. If it is manageable cost-wise, make sure that at least you test your feed and make sure that the birds are getting what they require. And in some cases, many people, although it's an additional expense, will add some vitamins in drinking water just to keep the birds healthy. And in any case where you see that there's some stressful conditions to your bird, sometimes you can supplement with a little bit of vitamins and minerals. But all the time, make sure that your birds have adequate feed, and that's balanced feed. water, and that the environment is actually conducive. They are comfortable, the environment is clean. Because if you raise your birds in a poor environment, that actually compromises their immunity, and you will not get your returns in that sense. Okay, this is just an illustration of the growth curves of the birds. For instance, when the curve is down here, this is when the birds just hatch. Uh, Usually after that, between 5 and, let's say, this is the pale gray guinea fowl, between 5 and, let's say, about 18 weeks of age, these birds are growing very, very fast. So that's when you make sure that your proteins, which is essential for muscle formation or for growth, is adequate in the feed. Make sure that the energy is adequate in the feed as well. Otherwise, if you limit those birds, since they do have that growth potential, if you limit them with feed, then you will not gain uh, that growth potential as such. Now, from our studies, we found that really the pale gray guinea fowl actually does require about 3,100 kilocalories of metabolizable energy. And usually that is between 0 to 4 and 5 to 6 weeks of age. So as I showed you the curve helps us to actually design the feeding profile for these birds so that we don't end up wasting feed or nutrients for that matter. So when the growth rate is slower, pretty much you reduce the crude protein. Sometimes you uh, reduce or increase the energy depending on the size of the birds. So we do have those opportunities to sort of match the needs of these birds. This is again is part of our studies with the pale gray guinea fowl. Um, During the latter ages, the birds do not require, during the laying phase, usually laying birds do not require a lot of crude protein, a lot of energy, because they just need maintenance level of nutrients. But again, most of those nutrients have to be directed towards production. This is the French guinea fowl. They require a little bit of a higher nutritional profile than the pale gray, because these are also heavier birds. Okay, let's pretty much go into the some of the common diseases in raising these small flocks like guinea fowl. Several of the diseases that we consider essential are such as the Newcastle disease, infectious bronchitis, which are viral. And then we also have bacterial diseases. I talked of Salmonella pylori. We also have fowl cholera and Clostridiums. And then we have some fungal diseases as well. If you store your feed poorly in wet environment, there are chances that you could put your birds into problems of contacting mycotoxicosis because this is fungal growth, and fungal loves to grow in wet environments. And so if the feed is infected or feed is moldy, then chances are that birds can pick it up, and then they come up with those specific issues. So as much as possible, you want to prevent any possibility of getting these nutritional diseases to your birds, or even diseases that can actually be transmitted by other animals, dogs, for instance. I mentioned wild birds earlier. So cats, rats, all those organisms can actually transmit diseases to your flock. So you want to make sure that you have a very good buffer system to prevent those other organisms from coming close to your birds. So vaccination is very essential, and again, more so when you're going to be raising these birds outdoors, because you are sure that they will come across um, some disease transmitting organisms. Now, if you are raising birds that are going to be laying eggs for hatching, that is breeder birds, make sure you vaccinate them, because usually that vaccination, those peptides or those antibodies that are developed from vaccination can actually be transmitted to the egg and to the embryo. So during the early ages of growth, those birds can actually make use of those antibodies and also get that protection from diseases. So wild birds, waterfowl, free-flying birds, all those are bad for your flocks. So in most part, and this is what I would say, try to keep diseases away from your birds, and also keep your birds, shelter your birds away from your diseases as much as possible. Um, let me try to address some of the questions that that actually have come up. Uh, so Jackie, hello.
I'm here.
I'm here. Okay, so I'm going to address the questions.
Okay.
Okay. Now there's
This one on the
this one
feed
on the feed
efficiency for a
efficiency
meat
for a
type.
meat type. Let's see, what's the average? Let me start with the what is the feed efficiency ratio for meat type uh, guinea fowl? It depends on age, and for the French guinea fowl, actually at early age we've actually found feed efficiency that is close to 2, about 1.95 to 2, which is pretty close to what we see in the broiler bird. But when they advance in age, since they don't grow as much as traditional poultry or broilers, that ratio sort of widens when you're comparing the broiler and the guinea fowl. So it could come up to 2.5, with age, when it's coming to 6 to 8 weeks of age. And usually the guinea fowl will get to market weight around 8 to 10 weeks. In other words, that is the comparable weight with the broiler. Now, so is that satisfactory?
What was that?
What was that? Was that? Did that address that question?
Yeah, I think
Yeah, I
so.
think so. Okay, and then I have David. David from, what is the average chick yield, i.e. chick weight versus egg weight? Now, this is a little bit, probably we can't really associate when we set on average large eggs. We'll get a yield, probably chicks weighing from 35 to about 40 to 45 grams. And again, there are many other factors that are associated with this. There's loss of water during incubation and so forth. So there's usually a little bit of variation, but you will get chicks that are actually within that range of 35 to 45 grams. And then Lisa, what is your recommendation of vaccines that outdoor birds should get? Does it look like what commercial layer hens receive? Exactly so. You just go to the co-op, and or just get in touch with a veterinarian. Uh, for instance, if these birds are staying outdoors, for instance, blackleg is one of those diseases that we actually vaccinate for turkeys, because they are raised outdoors. So those vaccines as well would be beneficial for the guinea fowl too. But again, there are those other vaccinations for both bacterial as well as viral diseases. For instance, the Newcastle disease and so on. We provide those to guinea fowl, just like we do uh, with the traditional poultry. Um, David, again, what is the whole bird processing yield? Eviscerated whole body live weight. What age? Really for the guinea fowl at 10 weeks of age, we've probably sometimes just harvested probably 950 grams. Um, yeah, that is for the sometimes, and it depends. There are some people who will raise the pearl grey for meat, and usually the pearl grey is going to be much smaller bird. So you'll get a yield probably close to a kilo. Usually the French you can easily get close to 3 kilos of dressed carcass after processing. And again, after removal of giblets and everything else.
It's a lot smaller than I thought it would be.
Yeah. No, but again, let me tell you, I mean, this is experimentally because we actually have, static or fixed management practices because this is experimental. Maybe someone who is I'm referring to someone who is just raising these birds out there. On average, probably you should be able to get about those about 3 kilos. No, about 3 pounds rather, not kilos. Okay, so are there commercial guinea fowl processing plants in the US? Not that I know of. And for those who do, usually they actually contract with the commercial processors, uh, the Tysons and so on. And or USDA actually does have some designated processing area where small producers can actually take their flocks. And I know there are some organizations too. There's a group, for instance, here in near Nashville. They have a mobile processing unit, and I think Kentucky does have some mobile processing units for small
Yeah,
flock producers.
there's a lot of custom processing facilities that
Hmm.
will do guinea fowl.
Right. So one has to go through that arrangement.
Are
Okay,
there any
someone
more
says
questions?
Texas. Texas. Yep. Probably Pennsylvania might have such as well.
I think that's actually yes. Thank you for answering my
Oh,
question
I'm
earlier.
sorry. Okay, not Texas. I saw TX.
No, it's not in Texas.
Okay, David.
Okay. If
Um,
there's no more questions, we'll have to wrap up. It's almost 4 o'clock.
okay.
There
Now,
are
now,
no.
if anyone has any other questions, specific questions, just send me an email.
Can you type your email in the chat box?
Okay. I'm gonna.
Well, Sam's doing that. I just want to point out that the next webinar will be November 2nd on turkey care and management. And Dr. David Frame will be the presenter for that one. I hope you'll come and listen to the turkey care and management. So, thank you guys for coming. This has been recorded and will be available online, pretty much the same place. Whoops, as you found it. I will. Go there, you can find it. If you want to know about any upcoming webinars, you can also go to extension.org Facebook page where we talk about um, latest news items as well as um, upcoming webinars and when the recordings are posted. So thank you all for coming, and hopefully we'll see you next month. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Sam.